Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you all here this morning, your bright, shiny faces.
Ernie's going to talk to us about nature this morning, and I'm not sure where he's going with that, but what I'd like to invite you to do is just think for a moment about a special place where you like to go in nature that provides or creates wonder and tranquility for you as you take a deep breath. And I'll read the words of Becky Hemsley to help give us that image. And she stopped, and she heard what the tree said to her, and she sat there for hours, not wanting to leave, for the forest said nothing. It just let her breathe.
Thank you, Anita. Join with me, please. We light this chalice for the light of truth.
We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. And we light this chalice for a harmony of peace.
I'm going to sing a song for you. And I meant to look up the composer this morning, and I forgot to. And it's a song written for St. Francis. How many of you are familiar with St. Francis?
Yes.
All right. And he was a nature lover. I guess you all know that, right? And my favorite story of St. Francis is when he talked to the wild wolf of Gubbio and told him to stop terrorizing the countryside. And he did. Stop. So it's called Boy from the Country. Because he called the forest brother, because he called the earth his mother. They drove him out into the rain. Some people even said that the boy from the country was insane. Because he spoke to the fish in the creek. He tried to tell us that the animals could speak. And who knows? Perhaps they do. How do you know they don't? Just because they've never spoken to you. Boy from the country left his home when he was young. Boy from the country, he loves the sun. He tried to tell us that we should love the land. But we just turned our heads and laughed. You see, we did not understand. Sometimes I think the boy from the country is the only one one who sees. Because the boy from the country doesn't see the forest for the trees. Boy from the country left his home when he was young. Boy from the country, he loves the sun.
That was written by Owen Castleman and Michael Martin Murphy.
Okay. Michael Murphy and
Owen Castleman.
Owen Castleman. All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. To the work of this fellowship,
Which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community.
we dedicate our lives.
And these are our offerings.
Our reading is from the Native American Indians, the Ute tribe, indigenous people who were here long before we were, that we committed genocide on. And it's a reading about the earth. And title is Earth Teaching, number 551. Earth, teach me stillness as the grasses are stilled with light.
Earth, teach me suffering as old souls suffer with memory.
Earth, teach me caring as parents who secure their young.
Earth, teach me courage as the tree which stands all alone.
Earth, teach me limitation as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom as the eagle which soars in the sky.
Earth, teach me resignation as the leaves which die in the fall.
Earth, teach me regeneration as the seed which rises in the spring.
Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life.
Earth, teach me to remember kindness as dry fields fleet with rain.
Thank you. I see some of you smiling. How many are familiar with the flower sermon of the Buddha? You know that sermon, silent flower sermon of the Buddha, where he doesn't speak, he just pulls up a flower. And only one of his followers, after a while, I don't know how long it took, maybe a couple of hours, who knows, but one of his followers smiles. And that smile was a recognition of the flower. And I mean, beyond that, it was just silent. But that smile was passed down from that disciple to another disciple, to many disciples down the way. It became the foundation for what's called Zen Buddhism. That's just an acknowledgement of smiling at a flower. Now, I should say that's the end of the sermon. You can all go home now. But I think it's very similar to Jesus teaching, consider the lily. You know, just consider the lily. Now, I've thought about this, so I have my own answers to talk about what that may have meant to me. But I want to give you all just if you have something you'd like to respond to about what you think that might have meant for that disciple who smiled, just the Buddha holding up a flower. What's that all about? Anybody want to take a shot at it? I've had time to think about it, so. Well, you know, think about it. Just let your imagination, just let it go free for a moment, and just think about looking at a flower.
Beauty all around us.
Beauty all around us, wonderful. Beauty all around us. Robin.
There's a saying that flowers are smiles from God.
Oh, okay. Flowers, smiles from God.
My reaction was that I wished I was closer to it so I could really look at it.
Yeah, you know that, I looked up that word, consider the lily. You know, some people say, well, Buddha held up a lotus flower. Who knows? Who cared what kind of flower? It was a flower, but the notion of consider is similar to the word contemplate. You know, when you really look close at a flower, you really look close to it and contemplate it. And that word contemplate comes from, it's the same word we have for temple. Temple comes from contemplate. And it's a Latin word that means to cut out. And when I think about that, cutting out, it comes from tim, which means cut out. For me, it means cutting out a time of our lives, a moment maybe every day where we just sort of contemplate what Andy said, the beauty that's all around us. Because I think we miss that beauty because we're so caught up in our own stuff. We miss the beauty that's all around us. And it's there. So we want to cut out some time. I think it was Paul Stuckey who said, the world does not go by too fast as we do. The world does not go by too fast. We do. We're hurried, harried people. You know, I come down here on the interstate from Asheville on Sunday mornings, and it's a rat race. Really. It's an absolute insane rat race on that place out there. And I think to myself, what is Sunday morning? Where is everybody going? But they're probably looking at me thinking the same thing. Where is he going? You know? And tragically, on my way here this morning, there were 2 dead cubs on the side of the road in Montgomery County. And it just says to me, you know, I can't stand to see dead animals on the side of the road, because it just says to me, we live in a culture that says, get out of my way or get run over. And if you get run over, tough for you. So cut out, you know, the beauty of the world, the flowers of God's smiles, the beauty of the world, if you believe in God or don't. God's gift to us. The Spirit's gift to us. Nature's gift to us. Now we say nature. But for our distant ancestors, they said mother. And they meant it. It wasn't a figure of speech for them. It wasn't just a nice way of saying Mother Nature, like that's a figure of speech. For our distant ancestors, there was a closeness to nature because they lived closer to nature than we do. And they were deeply aware of the gifts of nature. And when they said mother, they really meant mother. The earth was literally their mother. And, you know, think about identification and relation. Those 2 words, identification and relation. We have separated ourselves from nature, and so we have to learn to relate to it through all these different ways. You know, through going out in it, reading poems about it. But for our ancestors, it was an identification. I am this. This is me, and I am that. Think about the species of the childhood of our species. If you go back far enough, you find the same relation that our ancestors had to Mother Nature as an infant baby today has to its mother. And the 2 are one. The 2 are one. The baby in the mother's arms doesn't realize I'm a baby and this is my mother. It hasn't gotten that consciousness yet to separate itself from the mother, to say, I'm a person separated from this being who's nurturing me, who's feeding me. That identification. And if you want to see if you think about holdovers of that symbolism, think about, if you know anything about Egyptian religion, the goddess Isis holding the little baby infant Horus in her arms. The mother goddess holding Horus, the Pharaoh of Egypt, in her arms. And there's another image, and it's the image of Madonna holding the baby Jesus. To me, those are holdovers from that deep, deep, deep identification we have with the mother. I mean, you know, we can't live without nature, but nature can live without us.
Mm-hmm.
The flowers aren't beautiful for us. The flowers don't bloom for us. The flower doesn't give off a perfumed aroma for us. We're the ones who put the beauty in nature. You know the saying, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
So beauty is, to me, that deep, 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 deep down identification with something greater than any word can ever say. So the silent sermon, we just say nothing. That this flower, that this piece of nature has everything in it that you need to live a fulfilled, beautiful life. It has all the wisdom you need to live a life. Nature, Mother Nature has all the wisdom. Mother Nature was our first great teacher. Mother Nature was humanity's first great teacher. But it can't teach if we don't listen. If we're not listening. If we're so busy, so caught up in our stuff, we don't take the time out to maybe watch the ants. Our grandson, when he was growing up, he's about 3 years old, his name's Ryan, he would say to me and my wife, look at this ant line. And I said, what do I want to see an ant line for? Why do I want to see a line of ants? But he would just watch these line of ants. And finally, just maybe a year ago, he said, look at this this ant lion. And I said, what did you say? He said, ant lion. I said, what is that? He goes, you don't know what an ant lion is? All that time I thought he was talking about a line of ants. He was talking about, does anybody know what an ant lion is? It's that little bug that makes that little hole, and when the ant gets in it, it caves in and the bug eats it. It's called an ant lion.
Doodle bug.
Doodle bug, exactly. Doodle bug or doom bug?
Doodle bug.
Doodle bug. Yeah, you got to do doodle bug come out at night, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, watching the ant line. Now, here's the thing. What if I would have held up before you this morning, not a flower, but a rattlesnake? You'd have said, where's the back door? You heard that joke about the guy went to church, the guy had got out a rattlesnake, he goes, where's the back door? And the guy next to him said, well, they don't have a back door. And he goes, well, where would they like one? You know, snake handling is outlawed. You all know that, right? Well, it's outlawed, but they still practice it in some little churches in the boonies of the South. And it wasn't 2 or 3 years ago, a 7-year-old boy was bitten and died from a rattlesnake bite because they were handling rattlesnakes in the church. But the reason I say that is because, you know, we tend to romanticize nature. And I do myself, that nature is beautiful, but nature is also deadly. And there are flowers in nature, there are beautiful streams in nature, beautiful mountains, but there's rattlesnakes, ticks, alligators, crocodiles. Last night, no, wait a minute, it was this morning. I'm sitting in the den with my grandson, and he says, all of a sudden he screams out, there's a tick on me. And he looks and he's got a tick on his, and it's got a little ring around where the tick is. And of course he and I panic, and my wife's a nurse, she goes, don't panic. And she took care of it. But we've got to watch him closely. We've got to watch that tick bite for
Yep.
the next couple of weeks. I mean, I think that, we tend to romanticize nature. Nature is beautiful, but nature's deadly. And one of the stories I would tell is when I was about, I must have been about 13 years old, some friends and I, we'd walk around the neighborhood, and there was this one creek that ran through a couple of neighborhoods over, through a bunch of laurel thickets. And we would play in there. It was pouring rain, we were out playing, and we decided we'd jump in the creek because it had risen. And we thought we'd jump in the creek and float down. Well, we jumped in, floating down, and I came to a, where, branches fall and logs fall in the creek and it stops it up. Well, I got under there and I couldn't get out. And I thought I was going to die. And one of my friends reached in and pulled me out. So, but I think for our ancestors, you wouldn't say it was a fear of nature as much as it was a deep, deep respect for nature. To have respect. It was the kind of fear that's respectful. You don't want to pick up a rattlesnake. Speaking of rattlesnakes, you all remember that sermon I shared where I said I jumped on a rattlesnake? I was on a barrel. This was out in the Pisgah National Forest where they throw all their trash. The rangers put all their stuff back there. Well, I was on a barrel. I jumped on a pallet, and then I heard the rattle. Unfortunately, it wasn't a rotten pallet, or I probably would have been bitten. But at that moment, I had this experience that was, was panic, it was fear. And I jumped off, and then I had to lift up that pallet to see that snake. And I wanted my daughters to see it, who were 30 yards away. So I got a long pole, and I picked it up. It was a timber rattlesnake. But it made me aware of why our ancestors, our distant ancestors, felt that the snake was something holy and sacred. And there's lots of stories. And of course, in our part of the world, we demonize snakes sometimes. If you kill a snake, you kill Satan, who was tempting Eve in the garden. If you kill a snake, but in the East, it's different. They have this profound respect for serpents. But then again, in the biblical story, where the serpents are biting Israelites when they're wandering through the desert, does anyone know what God does? God says to Moses, make a pole and put a serpent on it. And when the people see the serpent, they'll be healed. And that's become the emblem, the symbol of the medical field, the two serpents.
Yep.
So we don't have an entirely negative view towards serpents. But I share that just to say we are aware of the beauty of nature, but we're also aware of the destructive forces of nature. But if you think about it, think about the word sacred. Again, if you know anything about the word sacred or holy, it comes from a sort of a double, awesome and awful. Awe is awesome and it's awful. So you have this profound respect for this teacher of wisdom that's all around us, nature. I think about the flower, I think about, here's this object, and there's no pretenses. It just is what it is. It doesn't put on any airs. It's not fake. It's not, there are fake flowers, all right? You heard the woman who'd been watering her cactus for years and years and it wasn't growing, and she finally realized it was made out of plastic. So, but if you just let your imagination roam around with that flower, it's the sense of just being centered in your own self, being rooted. I love the saying, be like a tree. Just be like a tree, firmly planted in yourself, in the center of yourself. Just be. And I think about that flower, no pretenses. It just is what it is, and you what you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. I think that's pretty much it. Well, I once heard a person describe a hurricane as sublime. Being a hurricane, they said, was sublime. That word sublime is where we get the word subliminal, which is, it's below the threshold of consciousness. We're not always aware of how we're being affected by something beautiful, or a rattlesnake. We're not always aware totally of that, what's happening to us. Now I'm going to end with this because I want to get, what time is it? Unfortunately, we have inherited a different view of nature in the Western world due to what's called the dogma of the fall. You all know what I mean by that, the dogma of the fall of man. And if you read the text, the word fall is not in it. If you read, the fall of Adam, the story of Adam and Eve, the word fall is not in it. That comes later when some of these wise bishops decided, well, we'll call it the fall because we're going to make it sound like that human beings fell from the grace of God and nature falls, so everything is fallen and humans are born damned and corrupt. And I love what this Shinto priest from Japan said to Joseph Campbell one time about this mythology. He said, God against man, man against God, God against nature, nature against God, man against nature, nature against man. Very funny religion. Now I want you to know, I don't know where you stand on that, but I wholeheartedly reject that dogma. And I did some years ago. I rejected that dogma. And when I found UU, I said I found my home, because our first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, not the inherent damnation and corruption of every person. But our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You're not born damned and you're not born corrupt. We don't need a human sacrifice, a brutal human sacrifice to save us. That's just me. You may have different ideas about that, but such a mythology or religion, in my opinion, is more than funny, as the Shinto priest said. It's tragic. And you know how tragic that has become, because in essence we're destroying our earth. And I think part of that destruction of the earth comes from that dogma, because I believe in the self-fulfilling prophecy. If I tell you long enough that you're damned and corrupt, and I keep telling you that over and over and over again, and beat it into your brain as a child, how are you going to act when you grow up? What kind of person are you going to be when you grow up if you're damned and cursed? So, I believe in the self-fulfilling prophecy that we're destroying the earth because we're damned and corrupt. And we don't see the beauty of the earth. And we don't appreciate, well, I'm speaking to the choir here, I really believe, because I think you will know what I'm talking about. And I think most of you, my guess is that most of you are absolutely lovers of nature, and you love nature. you respect nature, and you're open to what nature has to give to you. So in a sense, I'm preaching to the choir here. Let me quote one. I keep saying it's the last thing, but I think this is so important. There's a movement now called white Christian nationalism. Now I see all of you going like that, so you know what I'm talking about, right? It's serious business, folks. It's serious business. The number of Congress people and senators who are now consider themselves evangelical Christians has gone from 14% to 27%. And the Speaker of the House is a Christian nationalist. Serious business. But let me read to you the Genesis story of the creation of America. Our Genesis story, our creation story. Let me read it to you. The unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. I won't read the rest of it. Laws of nature and nature's God. This country was founded on that Declaration of Independence. The laws of nature and nature's God. Nature's God is not the biblical God. I hope I don't upset anybody. The enlightened, the founders of this country were products of the Enlightenment. And within the Enlightenment, they were products mainly of Stoic philosophy. And Stoic philosophy has very similar traits to Zen Buddhism. In Stoic philosophy, the Stoic philosophers made a big difference between accidents and essence. Accidents and the essence. Because they believed that all human beings were created equal, not based on the accidents of birth. We're different by virtue of the accidents of birth. How can we ever be equal if we're looking at the accidents of birth? They said the equality of the human being is not based on the accidents of birth. It's based on the essence of every human being that has the power within them to form and shape their lives in accordance with their values. America is the land of opportunity. It's not a Christian nation. We're a land of opportunity. The opportunity to form your life, shape your life. Genetics are not destiny. It's not a matter of the accidents of birth. It's a matter of you taking that power given to you and forming and shaping your life. And, you know, it's like we said of Derek. If any of you were at the memorial for Derek yesterday, he was not afraid to die because he had lived a fulfilled life. He felt like his life was a fulfillment. You know, and that, back again to this, you know where Buddha comes from, budding. Buddha comes from the awakening, the bud. You know, your life is like a flower, and you're blooming and blossoming, you know, into something beautiful. I love that saying, bloom where you are planted. Bloom where you are planted. not your ego. Your ego will get you in trouble. My ego gets me in trouble all the time, especially with my wife. Don't go there. You know, you have this core. If you want to call it the light of God or Buddha, or it doesn't matter what you call it. People get in fights over what you call it. But you have this center, and it's just wanting to bloom. And so, to me, I think, you know, Derek was not afraid to die because, and he went to his death with such dignity and grace. You know, he wasn't. Unfortunately, I had a grandmother who screamed her way to death. She literally screamed her way. She was in a nursing home, and she was one of those screamers. And I remember not long before she died, I went to visit her, and I was reading the Bible to her. And I got to leave, and she grabbed my hand, and she said, "Don't leave." And I said, "Well, Grandma, what's the matter?" And she said, "I'm so afraid to die. I'm so afraid to die. Don't leave me." You know, I can't judge her because I don't know. You know, I know she had a terrible life growing up. But, and I know she had done some things that were sins. And I know that she came out of a church that had taught that, you know, if you do these things, you might go to hell when you die. But anyway, for Derek, he was not afraid to die because he had, I think he said, he thought and he had believed that he had fulfilled his life's purpose. And he had blossomed. And we were all receptors of that gift. But you have that gift. You have it. And your life is important. And, you know, what you do in your everyday life matters a lot. And I love the story. I will close with this. And I love the story his daughter told when she said that her dad would smile and greet people. And how much difference that makes, just that little smile and be kind, you know. And the daughter said she had gone to the hospital to visit someone, and she walked in the door and smiled and said hello. And the woman just, it meant so much to that woman in the hospital, you know. So you can make a difference. And well, I hope you have time to stop and smell the roses today. Take the time, or just take a moment of your day just to contemplate some part of nature. Thank you all for listening. Kathy, you ready? We're going to sing, Kathy's going to sing, and I'm going to play you too. This is a song, and again, I don't know who the author is, but it's a song about whose garden was this?
Whose garden was this? It must have been mine. Did it have flowers? I've seen pictures of flowers, and I'd love to ask you one. Whose river was this? You say it ran freely. Blue is its color. I've seen blue in such pictures, and I'd love to have been there. Oh, tell me again, I need to know. The forest had trees, the meadows were green, the oceans were blue,
was this? And why is it empty? You say there were bird songs and squirrels and branches. Then why is it silent? But tell me again, I need to know. The forest had trees, the meadows were green, the oceans were blue, and birds really flew. Can you swear that was true?
Anyone want to, we have a few minutes left. Does anyone want to share anything they'd like to add or subtract or challenge the minister? Yes.
Can you touch on anything with paganism in your speech about nature and, paganism?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you touch on anything having to do with paganism, as a thought for nature and spirituality, the early people of the earth,
Yeah.
and how that relates to,
Yeah.
why we don't look at that more.
Right. That's a big one, and that, it's unfortunate that term has such negative connotations to it, like paganism. But it shouldn't, because the pagans were, what I consider pagans, which means common people. And the common people who got their wisdom from nature and their closeness to nature. So it's too bad that word is, it's gotten that kind of connotation to it. And I'm not a Christian, but I believe some good things that Paul said, even though I think he said a lot of stuff that was not good. One thing he said, the pagans do by nature what the law requires of the Jew. Now what does that mean? To me it's saying the pagans do by nature. He's baffled by the fact that how come we have the law, we can't seem to get it right, but these pagans are looking at the nature and somehow they do right. And I think he was confused by that. The pagans do by nature what the law requires us to do. That doesn't sound very but I'm not making that up. But yeah, paganism to me is, people say, well, that's nature worship. And nature, that's wrong, that's evil. Nature's corrupt. And I think that's sad. I think that's why, again, that self-fulfilling prophecy, we're acting just the way we're told to act.
Isn't that where it all began?
Yeah, nature was our first teacher. Nature was our first teacher. And you get to read the book of nature. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a big one. And we have some readings in our hymnal from...
I'd like to see that continue.
Okay. We have readings in our hymnal from, naturalist, nature. I guess I hate to use the word pagan.
There's also another word I use that you may be kind of referring to, is pantheism,
Yes.
which is a worship of nature. So it's similar there.
Everything is a manifestation of
Yes.
the divine. Yeah, pantheism. All these labels I think we use, and we forget that they're just, I love that Buddhist thing, people say, well, it's a finger, this finger. You got to have the finger. And Buddha said, no, the finger's pointing away. And so don't get hung up in the label. Every label is a symbol that's pointing to something. Just find out what it's pointing to, Find out what it's trying to point you to. So yeah, that's a good one, pantheism. But one of my favorite memories as growing up as a child was we had a woods beside our house, even though we lived in the city a few blocks from downtown Hendersonville, there was a woods beside our house, and that's where I spent all my time because in the house it was chaotic, and my dad was alcoholic. We didn't know when he would come home, if he'd come home drunk. So I spent a lot of times in that woods, playing in the woods, and that's where I felt I got what I needed as a child. And you know, I'd climb the trees and build forts, but there was one particular place I would go to lay down in the cold wintertime, and it was a little bank, and it was grassy, and I'd lay there and just look up at the blue sky. And I'll never forget that, because I think that's what, you know, that's what really saved me. It wasn't the church, or it wasn't the family, it was going out in nature and just being out there, you know. And I just, those are my fondest memories growing up. Anyway, I'll stop talking. You know, saying amen to a preacher is like saying sickle to a dog. But nobody has said amen, so I better stop talking. Well, we'll sing our last song. We'll extinguish the chalice. And if you'll join with me, please. We extinguish the flame of this chalice.
Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again.